Yep, it's June, meaning we're halfway through the year, and I've barely done anything. I should probably change that, but instead I'm going to stand here and tell you what my favorite listens of 2023 have been so far. By the end of the year, I'll probably do like a big media roundup of movies and anime and games and albums, but because I consume albums the most out of those mediums, I thought it'd be fun to go over some of my favorites that I've heard so far this year. Starting things nice and chill, we have Mac DeMarco with 2. It's very simple, kind of breezy, laid back indie rock. It kind of sounds a lot like the cover art. The guitar tone on this album is very thin, but Mac dishes out these very slick, catchy riffs on pretty much every song. It's always like a standout thing about the album. Just the guitar licks across it are very immediate and there. They really make the tracks. And there's a lot of humor in the writing on this album too, which I really like. It's not an album that takes itself very seriously, which I enjoy. For example, the song Ode to Viceroy is basically a love song to his cigarettes. And I thought that was very funny, and it just helps that it's one of the better songs here. But yeah, there's really not much I can complain about with this album. Sure, it's nothing mind-blowing, but it's just really nice, and I like that. Following that up with another Mac, that being Mac Miller, with Swimming. I've also been getting into Mac Miller as of recent. I heard his mixtape Faces on a cruise last year and loved it, and I had been very curious to check out Swimming. You know, it's a fan favorite, and I was curious if it would live up to the hype. And I'm not gonna lie, this is one of the best albums I've heard in a while. It's a near perfect, just phenomenal experience. Sure, it could maybe sound a little low impact to some people, but man, the instrumental backdrop is flawless on every single track, and there's just never really a dip in quality. Mac Miller is not the strongest vocalist on the planet, but he makes it work so well because of his ideas. The songs that he created are freaking just fantastic. Whether it's just some straightforward pop rap like on Self-Care, or some low-key funk on What's the Use, or emotional stunners like 2009, which is not only my favorite on the album, but it almost made me cry, I'm not gonna lie, and I think that says something. Yeah, Swimming, near perfect, if not perfect. I honestly haven't decided yet, but yeah, it's incredible. Next up, we have Lil Yachty. Let's start here. Yep, I love it. I had never heard a Lil Yachty song before this, but on Reddit and Album of the Year and YouTube to an extent, just everybody was like, guys, Lil Yachty made a psychedelic rock album, and it's good. I'm serious. And I'm sure like a lot of other people, I was like, Lil Yachty can't psych rock. But then I listened to it, and while I didn't love it as much as I do now the first time, I got the hype. Like, this is legitimately good psychedelic music. And in recent times, psych has become like one of my favorite styles. Flaming Lips, Giz, Tame Impala, I know that's like basic, but it's a great genre, and I feel like Lil Yachty came into it with not only appreciation, but just a good ear. Like, it really feels like a holistic experience because so many songs weave into one another, and while I don't think it's a perfect album, it's one that I can play all the way through without really feeling the urge to skip anything, which is really cool. In this track list, you not only get big, ambitious, psychedelic opuses like The Black Seminole, We Saw the Sun, or I've Officially Lost Vision, which are all awesome. But you also get some nice groovin' bops like The Ride and Drive Me Crazy, which are both very catchy. And as for Lil Yachty's vocals, I mean, sure, not the best, but I don't know, I think his weird auto-tuned voice lends really well to this neo-psych Tame Impala ass production. But yeah, I've been loving this album. Some of my friends did do as well, so that's been nice to have that. In fact, after me and some friends saw the Mario movie, we listened to this album on the way back at nighttime, and it was a vibe. Next up, I want to give a shout out to Somewhere City by Origami Angel. It's always nice when I find a good pop punk album, and this is definitely one of them. I wasn't a huge fan of their following album, Gammy Gang. I thought that was way too long, but this, it's short and concise and just really good. The vocals are very boyish and catchy. Meanwhile, the sound is kind of DIY-ish. It's kind of raw. The guitars are super thick, and the playing on this album is just watertight. Like, there are some awesome guitar and drum bits on this album that I love. And it's also one of the few pop punk albums where the guitar riffs actually add to the catchiness and memorability of the songs. If you're into stuff like, I don't know, early Weezer, or even that Remo Drive album, Greatest Hits, I think you really like this one. In fact, I think the attitude of this album is very similar to Greatest Hits, because it's not that serious or downtrodden. It's fun, it's optimistic, it's just a good time. I love it. Following that, we have Donuts by Jay Dilla. I had been meaning to listen to this album for a while, and I'm glad I did, because it's really great. What we have here is a ton of short instrumental hip-hop songs that are just fantastic. The sampling on this album is amazing. Like, they all just hit perfectly, with my favorite song probably being Waves. Like, this beat is so good that I don't just want it in my ears, I want it in my ass. But yeah, Donuts is just non-stop hip-hop ear candy, or in this case, hip-hop pastry. Yeah. Next up, I want to mention a re-listen, and that is Death Grips' Bottomless Pit. This thing rips. Front to back, it's exhilarating, it's aggressive, it's abrasive, and yet it's still kind of catchy and visceral. Yeah, you can really kind of have fun with it. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't really appreciate this one at first. In fact, it's so good that it might even be better than the Money Store. Like, the Money Store is definitely a little catchier, more electronic, but Bottomless Pit, it still has the industrial elements, but it also has a lot of rock influence, noise rock, just this punk kind of to it that I really like, especially when you get this onslaught of noisy guitar riffs just beating into your ears, like on Giving Bad People Good Ideas, or the closer, the title track, which is the best one, by the way. But there are tons of highlights on this album, like Spikes, Houdini, 3 Bedrooms in a Good Neighborhood is awesome, Ring a Bell slaps. I mean, this album is just, it's so good. Next up, I want to talk about the Low End Theory by A Tribe Called Quest. This is regarded as a classic hip-hop album, and I get the hype. Listening to some older hip-hop has been kind of interesting because when you're introduced to the genre with the extravagance of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, going back, that can be kind of jarring, because with the Low End Theory, the beats are basically just drums, a bass line, and some jazz samples placed in there. That's probably oversimplifying it, but that's kind of how it felt, especially on excursions. But once I kind of got used to it, it's great. The album has this head bobbing rhythm to it that I really can't deny. The jazz parts are smooth, and everybody in the group is very charismatic, especially Q-Tip. I don't quite know who is who, but I think he was the one that I liked the most. I don't think it's going to be one of my favorites in the genre, but I definitely get why it's regarded as a classic. Now here's one that I really loved, and that's After the Magic by Perennial. Man, this is amazing. This is another phenomenal album, and it's an album that I also think is going to be album of the year 2023. I'm just gonna call it right there. I don't think anything is going to top this. In a weird way, this album feels like the shoegaze equivalent to Nurture by Porter Robinson, which is a very good thing because that's one of my favorite albums. The whimsical vibe, the sweet melodies, and the electronic beats just remind me a lot of that album. You get these wonderful, blissful melodic parts that are contrasted by these really, really loud, crushing walls of sound. It's kind of oppressive, but you can still like pick apart all the different instruments, and that's really what I love about it. I absolutely love this thing, and I encourage you to check it out if you haven't. Following that with another current year album, that being Scaring the Hose by JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown. It's an extremely hard-hitting experimental hip-hop album from two of the best names in that genre. I'm more partial to JPEG Mafia's work, but Danny Brown carries his weight on this album. He's very entertaining, and JPEG's beats on this thing are incredible. I feel like with this album specifically, he's proven that he can make anything sound good, whether it's a random Japanese commercial, Khaleesi's milkshake, or a 90s anime theme song. Anything is on the table, and a JPEG can turn it into the hardest shit you've ever heard in your life. Again, it's a very hard-hitting album, it's addictive, and I just love listening to it. It's a real thrill ride, in my opinion. Following that, I have Circles by Mac Miller. I, of course, love swimming, so I had to check out Circles, and it's fantastic. It's of course a posthumous album, but it does not feel like it. It sounds lush and complete. I don't like it as much as Swimming, but it's still really great. I love the more soulful and emotional moments the most, like Hand-Me-Downs for example, but there are a lot of fun bangers too, like Blue World. I don't think the album sticks the landing perfectly, but I mean everything before it is pretty great to some degree. Yeah, I'm glad this was able to be completed and released because it is a fantastic album. Following that, I want to shout out Crumbling by Midair Thief. And yeah, it's pretty fantastic. This album is folktronica, but it's very heavy on the electronics, which is good for me because I'm usually not too huge on just bare acoustic music. There are some stripped back moments on this album, but the production is not dry. It sounds interesting. The chords are good. But yeah, the psychedelic electronic soundscapes that you get on this album are absolutely the best part. Like, These Chains is probably one of the better songs I've heard this year. Just when all the instruments just layer on top of each other in this insane way, it's mesmerizing. In fact, mesmerizing is really the word I'd use to describe this album. The first half is marginally better than the second, but songs like Protect are still really good. I also think the way acoustic guitar and electronics are blended on this album kind of remind me of Yoshimi by The Flaming Lips. So if you're a fan of that album, then you might like this. It's a very unique sounding album to me, and I'd say it's a must listen for really any psychedelic fan. Alright, next up we got some dad music with Asia by Steely Dan. Man, the 70s, am I right? That's when music was good. Not none of this rap garbage. But anyway, this album is pretty fire. You have pristine production, interesting instrumental passages, and great choruses to boot. What's not to love? Like, everything feels so fine-tuned and crafted and just really nice. Black Cow is an amazing start. I love the saxophone on the title track, and Peg is a certified banger. Pretty much every track is enjoyable. I mean, there's only 7 of them, so there's no fat. It's like a perfectly grilled filet steak. No bullshit, just pure meat. Next up, I have Perennial's previous album, To See the Next Part of the Dream. I was so blown away by After the Magic, I had to go back, and yeah, this one's great too. It's a lot noisier and rougher than his new one, but that's okay. The drums are blasted out. There's a lot of heavy riffs that kind of have a bit of a post-hardcore vibe to them, I guess. I might be off on that, but that's kind of the vibe I got. And in true Perennial fashion, you get plenty of oppressive walls of sound. So yeah, it's a little rougher. But beneath all of that, there's some pretty genuine bliss here thanks to the vocals and some synths, which is definitely the case on my favorite track, Analog Sentimentalism, and of course the opener is phenomenal. My only issues are that the very blown out drums can get kind of repetitive, and the last 3 songs are nowhere near as good as the stuff that preceded them. But it's still a great project, and if you enjoy it, I also definitely recommend the EP that he released after, which contains a 17-minute demo of White Ceiling, and I might just enjoy it more than the final product. And finally, I want to shout out this Snow Strippers mixtape, April Mixtape 3. I saw Fantano's review of this, it piqued my interest, and oh boy, this is the best electronic album I've heard in a while. Like, I guess it's some electro pop, some electro clash, whatever the hell that is. But this isn't some bubblegum experience. Now, you could play this shit at a rave with colorful flashing lights everywhere, and everyone in the crowd is wearing crazy clothes and goth makeup. I've seen people, including Fantano, compare this to Crystal Castles, and I definitely see that comparison in some of the ghostlier vocals and the more rough around the edges aesthetic. But look, I like the debut Crystal Castles, but I do think it's a little all over the place for me. This, in comparison, is laser focused on delivering just incredibly high energy dance bangers one after another. This album does not let up. But thanks to some very sticky vocal hooks on tons of tracks, this album doesn't turn into mush. Sure, there's not much variety, but like, I don't care. Like, when I first started the album and again turned on, I was just like, whoa, this is good. Like, it probably has like the catchiest vocal on the whole album. Like, the instrumentals are just high octane dance beats and fast synths. I mean, I can't really describe it too well right now because the album was just like a but so I can't really comprehend everything, but what I know is it's great and it's definitely one of my favorites of the year. Definitely check it out if you love electronic music. In fact, just talking about it makes me want to go and listen to it. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you got some good suggestions out of it. And if you're a fan of any of these albums, let me know in the comments, and you can talk about it. Yeah, hopefully I'll be able to do a media roundup, and I'll have like a definitive top 10 favorite listens of the year then. But until then, I'll see you next time. Yeah.